have been quite interesting. I would have probably called it the Five Kings. You know, he's that worthy of fighting those guys and making great fights. Everybody had their own unique style.
Yes.
Duran was a beast.
Yes.
Oscar de la Hoya has faced legends: Pacquiao's speed, Mayweather's precision, Hopkins' power, but none hit him as hard as this. At 52, the Golden Boy just revealed the most brutal punch he ever took, and it's not from a boxer. The name comes from an entirely different sport, and the story behind it might just change how you think about power in the ring. Once you hear who it is, you won't forget it. But to understand how we got here, you have to go back. Long before this shocking confession, De La Hoya built a legacy on speed, skill, and iron will. He stood across from some of the most dangerous fighters on the planet, yet nothing prepared him for the moment that truly shook him. And it didn't happen in the ring. Before the pay-per-view millions, before the flashy suits and business moves, Oscar de la Hoya was simply a kid from East Los Angeles with fast hands, sharp footwork, and a dream bigger than the ring he trained in. Born in 1973 to a boxing family, Oscar wasn't just handed gloves. He was raised on them, as his father had been an amateur boxer and his grandfather fought professionally in Mexico. But it wasn't legacy that made Oscar different. It was how he turned pain into purpose. Oscar's mother, Cecilia, passed away from cancer when he was just 17, and before she died, she told him she believed he would win an Olympic gold medal. This faith became his fuel, and in 1992, in Barcelona, with the weight of her words still heavy on his heart, he delivered. Oscar represented the United States and won gold in the lightweight division. For him, this wasn't just a win, it was a symbol, a moment that defined him not only as a boxer, but as a fighter in every sense. After Barcelona, the spotlight was already chasing him. Sponsors lined up, and this was when the media dubbed him the Golden Boy, a nickname that stuck. Oscar didn't waste time riding the Olympic wave because in September 1992, at just 19 years old, he stepped into the professional ring for the first time, knocking out Lamar Williams in the first round. It was quick, clean, and sent a clear message that he wasn't there to play, and what followed was a run that built his reputation brick by brick. Oscar de la Hoya didn't duck challenges. He climbed through 6 weight classes, starting from super featherweight all the way up to middleweight, and collected titles along the way. Altogether, Oscar acquired 11 world titles in total, which wasn't very common even among boxing elites. However, Oscar had the skill set to match his ambition. Despite not being the hardest hitter in the game, his combinations were clean, his timing sharp, and his ring IQ was constantly evolving. By 1995, only 3 years into his professional career, the Ring magazine named him Fighter of the Year, which was the kind of recognition that doesn't come easy. Oscar's wins weren't sloppy or controversial. He was fighting well, fighting often, and fighting with something to prove. And people noticed. This was the golden era of televised boxing, and Oscar became one of its biggest attractions. While some fighters struggled to sell out venues, Oscar was pulling in millions on pay-per-view, and this was long before Floyd Mayweather coined the phrase "money," before Manny Pacquiao became a global star. Oscar's fights generated over $700 million in pay-per-view revenue over the course of his career, and what made him so marketable wasn't just his skill, it was his crossover appeal. Oscar could be on the cover of The Ring one week and GQ the next. Asides boxing, he was fluent in Spanish and English, which opened up media opportunities and fan bases that other fighters couldn't tap into. So naturally, he had the support of the Mexican and Mexican-American community. However, his reach extended far beyond it. Still, For all the headlines and magazine covers, Oscar never strayed too far from what made him successful. His work ethic remained his anchor. He was known for clean living, disciplined training, and staying in shape even between fights, making it clear that he took boxing seriously. He studied tape and respected his opponents in an era where trash talk often overshadowed talent. But just when you think you've seen it all from Oscar de la Hoya, an unexpected punch from an unlikely opponent rewrites everything you thought you knew about power in the ring. In a moment of casual honesty, Oscar admitted who hit him the hardest in his entire career, and it wasn't even a legendary fighter or even someone from the world of professional boxing. It was none other than National Basketball Association icon Shaquille O'Neal, the same Shaq who won 4 NBA championships and is known as one of the most physically intimidating athletes the NBA has ever seen. So how did a man who has nothing to do with the boxing world become a boxing legend's hardest opponent? Back in 2009, during an episode of the reality television show Shaq vs., the Hall of Fame Center stepped into the ring with De La Hoya for a friendly exhibition, which was supposed to be lighthearted entertainment. It was a chance to see how Shaq could stack up against some of the world's best athletes in their own sports, but what ended up happening in the ring surprised even Oscar de la Hoya. To truly understand the weight of Oscar's statement, you need to picture the matchup. At the time, Shaq stood at 7 feet 1 inches and weighed roughly 325 pounds, while Oscar, on the other hand, was 5 feet 10 inches tall and usually fought around 147 to 160 pounds during his prime. The size difference was extreme, as Shaq wasn't just taller, he was basically towering Oscar. His reach was wider, his fists much bigger, and even in a playful exhibition, his natural strength could not be ignored. Now keep in mind, this wasn't a sanctioned fight, so there were no judges, no real consequences, and no one expected fireworks. It was more of a show than a showdown, but when the two squared up, even under relaxed rules and friendly terms, Oscar got a taste of something he hadn't felt in all his years fighting elite professionals. In an interview reflecting on that moment, De La Hoya admitted, "It's probably the hardest I have been hit, and he wasn't even trying to hit me hard." This spoke volumes because it was coming from a man who shared the ring with Floyd Mayweather, known for his precision, with Manny Pacquiao, known for speed and volume, and with Bernard Hopkins, who was relentless. But according to him, none of them, not one, landed a punch that left the same impression on him as Shaq's playful shot. This was because Shaq, by nature, is built differently, and when someone that big moves his arm, even casually, it carries more weight than most fighters throw with full intention. For someone like Oscar, who had been hit by the best, this wasn't the kind of force he was used to. To be clear, De La Hoya didn't say it was the best punch or the most skillful hit. He didn't claim Shaq would win in a real fight. He basically implied that the impact of being hit by someone with that much mass behind their punch, even in a non-competitive setting, left an impression, and to Oscar's credit, he didn't shy away from the truth of it. This moment also gives us a rare window into what fighters experience behind the scenes, because in the world of boxing, we often focus on the big names, the knockouts, and the titles. But what really stands out to a fighter, sometimes it's not the bout with the most hype. Sometimes it's a random exhibition that nobody really paid attention to, and that tells you a lot about what power really means. It's not always measured by records or belts. Sometimes, it all comes down to how your body responds the moment the punch connects. There's something humanizing about Oscar's honesty here. He didn't try to protect his ego or rewrite the memory to make himself look tougher. He simply acknowledged that the biggest guy he ever stood in front of, someone outside his sport entirely, hit him in a way that stayed with him. And Shaq, to his credit, wasn't even trying to go full force. It wasn't a boxer who threw the hardest punch, and if you thought that was wild, wait till you meet the man Oscar considers toughest boxer he ever faced. The Brick-Fisted Challenge. There's a reason Oscar de la Hoya never hesitates when asked which boxer delivered the heaviest punches he's ever faced. He doesn't fumble through names, nor does he try to stir controversy. He simply says, Ike Quartey, and he says it with the kind of respect that only comes from someone who's felt every ounce of those punches. Quartey isn't a household name like Mayweather or Pacquiao. He didn't have a flashy nickname or the media hype machine behind him, but those who know boxing understand exactly why Oscar singles him out. So who is Ike Quartey? Issoufou Ike Quartey, nicknamed Bazooka, is a legendary Ghanaian boxer born on November 27, 1969, in Accra. He began his boxing journey at the renowned Akotoku Gym, where he developed his skills and built an impressive amateur record of 50 wins and 4 losses. His talent earned him a spot on Ghana's national team, representing the country at the 1988 Seoul Olympics. Quartey turned professional in 1988 and won the World Boxing Association welterweight title in June 1994 with an 11th round TKO over Crisanto España. He went on to defend the title successfully 7 times with no losses. Known for his powerful jab, tight peekaboo defense, and heavy hands, Quartey earned international respect by competing against some of the sport's top fighters, but his most memorable fight came in February 1999 against Oscar de la Hoya, a thrilling showdown that ended in a controversial split decision loss. When Oscar de la Hoya faced Ike Quartey in February 1999, both men had plenty at stake. Oscar was undefeated and held the World Boxing Championship welterweight title, while Quartey, a former World Boxing Association champion, was known for his toughness, precision, and resilience. The build-up to the fight wasn't marked by trash talk or flashy headlines. It was all business. Both fighters understood the magnitude of the moment and came prepared. But from the opening bell, Oscar immediately felt the difference in Quartey's power and presence. In later interviews, when Oscar was asked about the fight, he remarked that Quartey's punches felt like bricks, and every punch would rattle him. This was no hyperbole. It was fact. Even when Quartey wasn't landing clean shots, the sheer weight behind his punches left a mark. Though Oscar wasn't a stranger to hard hitters, as he had been in the ring with Rafael Ruelas, Julio Cesar Chavez, Pernell Whitaker, and even later faced Fernando Vargas and Bernard Hopkins, Quartey still stood out. It wasn't because he knocked Oscar down, but because he kept him uncomfortable for nearly every round. The fight was a chess match, and a slugfest rolled into one. Both men had strong jabs, and they used them to set the pace, but Quartey's jab continued to disrupt Oscar's rhythm. Most fighters use the jab to measure distance or control rhythm, but Quartey used it like a weapon, and Oscar couldn't avoid it. This alone changed how he fought that night, and when they got to the 6th round, Quartey dropped Oscar with a right-left combination, causing Oscar to hit the canvas. And while he got up quickly, the tone had shifted. Oscar responded later in that same round with a knockdown of his own, but even that didn't erase the physical and mental toll Quartey was applying. It's also worth pointing out that this wasn't a sloppy fight. Both fighters were skilled, but Quartey's punches had a different kind of weight, and it wasn't the kind that always gets a reaction from the crowd, but the kind that wears you down. Quartey had moves that chips away at your legs, slows your counters, and lingers after the round is over, and that's exactly what Oscar meant when he implied Quartey was the toughest boxer he ever faced. He didn't say Quartey hit him the hardest because it made for a great soundbite. He said it because, round after round, Quartey shots stayed with him, and not in a highlight reel way, but in a way only a fighter truly understands. At the end of it all, Oscar won that fight, but by split decision. Some fans felt it could have gone either way, while others still argue about it. However, Oscar never downplayed Quarty's performance. Years later, Oscar still brought Quarty's name up when asked about the hardest hitters, and he didn't say it with fear, but with clarity. It takes a certain level of humility for a fighter of Oscar's stature to consistently give credit to a guy who never became a mainstream star, but that's the thing about boxing. Quarty may not have the same legacy on paper as Oscar, but he earned that respect the hard way from the start to the final bell. When Oscar describes those punches as bricks, he's not being poetic. He is simply describing the physical reality of that night. You can prepare for speed, you can study tape, you can drill footwork and head movement, but when someone like Quarty throws hands with that kind of pressure behind them, there's only so much you can do. It becomes a survival game that you're still trying to win, still trying to score points, but there's a deeper focus too, which is getting out of there intact. And that's what Oscar did. In the final round, which was one of the most memorable of his career, he let his hands go in a furious rally that may have secured the win. Oscar threw over 60 punches in that round alone, and that moment showed the other side of Oscar de la Hoya, the fighter who doesn't fold, but even that surge didn't erase what came before. When you talk about legacy, you expect titles and triumphs. But for Oscar de la Hoya, it's the unexpected that hits both inside and outside the ring that shaped the man behind the gloves. Legacy for Oscar de la Hoya isn't only built on wins or belts. It's made up of moments, some painful, some surprising, and others that stay with you long after the cameras stop rolling. And that's what makes his reflections so different from the usual boxing story. Because when Oscar speaks on the hardest punches he's ever taken, he doesn't just name elite boxers. He talks about Ike Quarty, a fighter many forgot. He talks about Shaquille O'Neal, who's not even a boxer, and that honesty forces you to rethink what toughness and legacy actually. Oscar de la Hoya faced the very best of his era. From Floyd Mayweather and Shane Mosley to Bernard Hopkins and Manny Pacquiao, he stepped into the ring with fighters who weren't just champions, they were icons. These are names that fill Hall of Fame ballots, dominate highlight reels, and drive some of the biggest pay-per-view events in boxing history. Take Floyd Mayweather, for example. When they met in 2007, it wasn't just a fight, it was a global event. At the time, it became the highest-grossing bout in boxing history. Oscar started strong. He was aggressive, sharp, and took the early rounds by pushing the pace. But as the fight wore on, Mayweather settled in. Mayweather didn't rely on power or aggression. Instead, he used patience, timing, and precision. He studied Oscar's rhythm, made adjustments, and took control. By the later rounds, Mayweather was dictating the pace, slipping punches, and landing clean counters. The fight wasn't war, but a masterclass in ring control, and while Oscar didn't walk away physically damaged, the loss still stung, not because he was beaten up, but because he was outthought. It was a clear reminder that skill and strategy could outshine experience, even for someone with Oscar's track record. It wasn't about who hit harder, it was about who solved the puzzle quicker, and that realization, for a seasoned champion, was a different kind of blow. Bernard Hopkins posed a different kind of challenge. When he and Oscar met in 2004, Oscar was chasing history and looking to win a middleweight title by moving up in weight. It was a bold move, but it came at a cost, and in the 9th round, Hopkins landed a body shot that was sharp, perfectly placed, and impossible to recover from. It ended the fight and handed Oscar one of the most clinical defeats of his career. Moving on to the 2008 bout with Manny Pacquiao. By that point, Oscar was exhausted both physically and mentally. Yet for some reason, he agreed to fight at 147 pounds, a weight he had not fought with in years, and it showed. Pacquiao was faster, more explosive, and refused to let up. So after 8 rounds of one-sided action, Oscar's corner stopped the fight. The fight didn't end in a knockout, but a surrender, and for a fighter like Oscar, that felt even heavier. It didn't just mark a loss, it marked the end. Pacquiao didn't simply beat him, he overwhelmed him. At 52, Oscar de la Hoya is far removed from the days of dazzling footwork, clean combinations, and golden trunks under Las Vegas lights. The man once called the Golden Boy now sits behind a desk at Golden Boy Promotions, managing fighters instead of fighting them. Oscar transitioned from contender to promoter, guiding young boxers through the same path he once walked. Today, he is shaping prospects into champions, helping them navigate contracts, cameras, and pressure because he knows the game from every angle, and he's using that experience to build something lasting beyond his own legacy. However, Oscar de la Hoya hasn't limited himself to the business of boxing. He has also stepped into pop culture, branching into roles few former fighters embrace. He has made guest appearances on shows like The Masked Singer, appeared in documentaries, and even dipped into the unpredictable world of influencer boxing. Oscar has gone back and forth with names like Jake Paul, not because he needs the attention, but because he knows how the boxing game and the media game works. It is less about pride and more about relevance. Oscar has made it clear he's not stuck in the past. So do you believe Shaq's punch really hit harder than the greats? And what does this say about how we measure true power in sports? Let us know your thoughts in the comment. If you enjoyed this video, click on the next video on your screen.